hop is a murderer?
Yes or no?
I would say hip hop is pulling the trigger. But as far as when you get the first degree murder charge, they say it's the motive.
Yeah.
I say the motive is coming from elsewhere. But hip hop is pulling the trigger.
Conversations about sex, politics, religion, pop culture,
all of it,
everything else in between. I'm your host, Corey Kareem. Long next side to the lovely and beautiful.
Jeez, Corey, thank you.
Angelina
Williams, I'm here, and we've got a special guest today.
We do have a special guest, but before that, I want to give some context to today's show. So the name of today's show is Hip Hop is a Murderer. And to give you context behind where I came up with this is, I came across, well, first of all, let me start like this. Anyone that knows me, I'm a huge hip hop fan. In fact, my first rap tape, remember that thing with the cassette tape? For those super young millennials out there, was Crisscross. So I've been listening to hip hop since I was 9 years old. And I go way back, and I love it. It's a source of motivation. It's a source of inspiration for me. But oftentimes now that I'm a little bit older, 35 to be exact, I wrestle with certain things that I hear because I find that, is hip hop kind of pigeonholing the community to a certain extent?
It's changed.
And I came across a TED Talk with Lecrae, and it's called Heroes and Villains. And that's where the inspiration for this podcast comes from. So, with that being said, Ange, I'll let you introduce our special guest.
Yeah, again, likewise, I love hip-hop. I love storytelling. I love the poetry of it. So when we started talking about this subject, I was like, I know the perfect guest to have on the show. Dalton Higgins. I mean, if you're from Toronto, you know Dalton. You've seen his face everywhere. Dalton is an award-winning journalist, TV broadcaster, festival and concert producer, activist, and I think most of us, if you don't know him from TV, know that he's an amazing author. How many books do you have now?
It's 6.
6 books.
Just 6.
Just 6. He's out here like this.
Real casual.
And one of the subject matter that you write a lot about is hip hop. And you've been in the industry for a really long time, when the hip hop industry in Toronto was just a baby. So you've seen it evolve and become what it is. So when Corey's like, yeah, let's do this, I'm like, I gotta get Dalton on. So I'm really excited to have you here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm sitting next to the lovely and talented Angelina Williams. Like, how could any mere mortal decline that kind of invite?
Jeez, you guys, thanks. No, but for real, we have conversations about our community and our messaging and what we put out there. You and I have had so many conversations that I'm like, I gotta get this recorded. So I've been wanting to have you on the show for a while and hoping you come back again, but just want to get this one started off for the new year and have you talk about this topic that means a lot to us as young Black kids growing up in Toronto. Hip hop was our life, or is our life, one could say.
Very much so.
Like Corey said, how much does hip hop still reflect who we are today?
Yeah. So, Andrew, you wanna throw the first lob? I like to use switch terms,
lob the first grenade at Dalton Higgins.
There's a few things. I want to dive into a little bit about you and what you do before we go into the deep sea stuff. So what are you working on right now?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually a textbook multi-hyphenate, polyglot. So when some people know me as an author, I've just 6 books in the marketplace to public library for those that can't find them in Chapters Indigo or Barnes and Nobles.
That's actually kind of big, actually, to be in the Toronto Public Library. Mm-hmm. That's really dope.
Yeah. It's more important that my titles are in the library than available at the retail level, because I don't really care about royalties. I care about disseminating strong information, knowledge, and also that it be accessible, right? So Toronto Public Library, I'm a huge fan because it's you can take out books for free.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's literally no excuse. If I want to learn how to, develop a podcast, for example, there are books, titles, at Toronto Public Library that I can read, devour a couple hundred pages, and then boom, presto, I'm a podcaster, right? So I think, it's not that, it's not so simple, mind you, but so it's more important that it's accessible to young people, elders,
So again, you got all these hyphens behind your name and all the things that you do. And I think one of the you're talking about your books, but you're an amazing storyteller from your PR company and being a publicist and telling the story of your clients, but just a storyteller. When we see you on CP24, CTV, and all that stuff, you're trying to tell the story of our community. And for me, again, what I love about hip hop, why Tupac still remains at the top of my list, is because he is a remarkable storyteller. Right? It's like you're lost in it, the poetry of it. But
the best ones are though.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they were. I mean, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But how does hip hop and the hip hop culture continue to tell its stories and express its frustration without? I guess some people say the messaging can be misogynistic or violent, or or is it necessary to tell our story?
Right, absolutely. That's a good question. I mean, hip hop, for one, hip hop is this all-encompassing culture. Okay, so when people talk about hip hop is sexist, misogynist, homophobic, anti-whatever, I think it tends to neglect the cultural aspect. So hip hop is this thing. We're talking about people that are into dance. Okay, let's go back. Let's take a trip back into Corey's. You know what I mean? Pubescent years. So me, I was like a b-boy. You know what I mean? How you b-girl. So into dance. So you have some people that are engaged in the hip hop culture that have nothing to do with rap music. Okay, so when we talk about any conversation around hip hop culture, we'd be doing it a disservice if we neglected to mention that there's a dance component. There's you have a bunch of kids and elders and baby boomers, 40-somethings, whatever, that are into the DJ aspects. Right? So they do all the gadgetry and spin vinyl with their head and their chin. Turntablists, we call them, right? People that are into visual art. Okay, visual artists. Graffiti. Right? They're out right now as we're Different World Podcast. They're out there putting together designs for buildings and condos and legally or otherwise. Right? So hip hop is this whole. It's this you know what I mean? It's this massive culture. Rap just happens to be kind of like the face of it because it's out there in the popular culture. We hear about Kanye's now Born Again Christine. We hear about all this stuff. This rubbish. We can dig into Kanye later on in the podcast, but so it has so many strands and tangents, and then so when we talk about hip hop, I want to, you know what I mean? There are other aspects outside of the rap,
So if we were to relate it just to the music aspect,
totally.
right? One element of the hip hop culture. Going back to Angie's question, so do you think it's possible that artists could tell their story, whether let's just say negative, let's say their upbringing was negative, can they tell that story without glorifying the negative aspects of their story?
Right. I would say no. And the reason being, rap music, as a part of that, underneath that umbrella of hip hop culture, is it's there to put a mirror to reality. Okay. Now, so if I were to hear, say, we were just talking about, I was talking to Angelina about real estate in Toronto, just how god awful and sucky it is. If you're trying to purchase property, condominium, townhouse, semi-detached, it doesn't matter. It's all, the average condo now is like almost $700,000. The average house, like freestanding house, it's like about $1 million. Right. So that sucks. If you are, making, minimum wage, $40,000, it doesn't really matter. You could even be making $80,000 a year in Toronto. It's still very difficult to get into the marketplace. Okay, that sucks. What your textbook case rapper will do is they're gonna tell you that it sucks. The who, how, what, where, when, and why it sucks. Okay, they're gonna be like, there are no jobs out there. I can only make up to whatever $30,000 because nobody wants to hire me because I'm a black male of African descent who wasn't is not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. So they're gonna spell it out for you. That's what the best rappers do, right? Now what we know about just popular culture in general, never mind hip hop culture, rap music, is the things that become most sexy and saleable are things that glorify violence, that talk, like as far as degrading women, and this is separate from hip hop. So we're talking about whether it's like the porn industry. Like if you look at the numbers of things that things in popular culture that have to do with like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Those are oftentimes the best selling. Because we live in a capitalist society, right? This isn't Cuba. You know what I mean? We're in Toronto, right? So if you look at as far as meeting bottom lines and you want to make money, just fully degrade yourself, engage in like sex, drugs, and or let's talk about marijuana. Marijuana's now legal. I mean, I'm Jamaican. That was born here. Parents are Jamaican. I'm Jamaican background, and so marijuana was not. It's just a thing that people put in tea. You know what I mean? Back home, and it's not even a thing. It's a plant, right? But if you look at some of the best businesses now, as far as I'm an entrepreneur. You look at just go downtown. College Street, Yonge Street, Queen Street West, King Street West, and look at the companies where business is booming. And what they're doing, it's
what are they selling?
So it's marijuana. Like they're long lineups. Like while companies have clothing companies. I want to start a clothing company, a shoe company. There's barely anybody coming in, not making a lot of money. Look at all of this dispensaries and look what's happening there. Look at the lineups. Like they're making a ton of money because it has to do with so-called drugs. Like that's if you want to make money. What's the world's oldest profession? Prostitution. Like it's just right. Hollywood. What is Hollywood peddling ad nauseum? It's buildings being blown up. It's sex. That's what it is, and they sell like hotcakes.
So to that point, we know that pop culture has taught us that regardless of race, that sex and violence sells. But do you think hip hop right now is set up in such a way that it's the only way it can succeed? Like basically another way of asking this question is, why is there more Cash Money Records and less like Talib Kweli's?
Right, totally. So hip hop, or let me give you this sort of anecdote. Let's say Dalton Higgins, I want to become a rapper, and I suck. I can't rap for SHIT. That being said, let's say I wanted to, on the one hand, rap about climate change. Like let's say I put out an album and it's about climate change and green living. And vegetarianism, or no, vegetarianism is kind of cool now actually. But just whatever. Totally. You know what I mean? So on the one hand, I'm like, okay, Dalton Higgins, new rapper, out of Toronto, straight out of Toronto, not straight out of Compton, and I want to, rap about climate change, and then on the other hand, Dalton Higgins, the rapper, the bizarro Dalton Higgins, wants to rap about like blowing up buildings and sex and drugs and AK-47s. In a capitalist society, where we have this weird fascination and obsession with guns, and drugs and violence and sexism and all that. Which of the two acts do you think are going to sell? Are going to meet bottom lines if you want to make money? You think it's going to be rapping about climate change?
No,
I don't think it is.
But you know what? For all the Jaden Smiths in the world, I think there is definitely a avenue for those people that want to have a different messaging, which I find really refreshing. I mean, I have a teenage daughter, and initially I was kind of shocked because this mumble rap stuff that was coming out, I didn't get it, and I was like, what? I started sounding like, what's this crap that you're like, I started sounding like that old.
Hippity hop,
But I took a minute and stopped criticizing it. Like, this is not what I grew up listening to and expecting it to be like a Lauryn Hill all the time, right? And it's kind of say, okay, well, what's the message? What's happening? It's coming out differently because my ear is not tuned to that frequency, but my daughter's ear is tuned to it. And what are they saying? And I start to like really pay attention to like those little Uzi Vert guys or whatever. And there is messaging there, right? It's to me it's sad, and I feel like heartbroken, but it's talking about things that's real to them, like depression, like needing to pop a pill to kind of get things going, right? Needing to like feeling like, where do I belong? This displacement. So the angst of the music is still there. The problem or the issue is just a little bit different. And me comparing like the Jay-Z's to you know,
Like
the little Uzi Verts, like the new kids that are on the block kind of thing. But also, I think that there is, the images of hip hop are also transforming. They're becoming a lot more fluid, a lot more inclusive and open, right? We talk back in the day. We used to talk about the hyper masculinity of hip hop and whether or not that's, you know, problematic or toxic or whatever kind of term you want to use to describe it. And you know, again, we mentioned the homophobia and it's like, oh, there's these little boys in dresses now. What's going on and what have you? But it's their mode of expression, and hip hop, I think, has always been very rebellious in pushing, saying, I'm going to express myself and talk about my experience and F the establishment.
That's at the core of the culture. That's at the core of the culture for the good, the bad, or the ugly.
Absolutely.
But rap music is rebel music.
Right.
You know, it's outlaw music. It's a maverick culture. That's what it's there to question. It's there to debate. It's there to challenge. That's what it's at the core of it. It's very political. Now, here's the thing. Just further to your piece, you know, what the issue is now is having that, you know, the full range, right? So, you know, back in the days, you know, like, you know what I mean? I'm like, you know, Generation X, right? And so you had just a broader range of, you know, when we talk about subject matter, so you would have, like, I could point to, you know, if you're into, you know what I mean, Public Enemy, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, you know, and it goes on, you know, and then you have your hyper political acts, you know, that are, it could be, you know, Public Enemy, I already mentioned, KRS-One, Rakim, and then you had, you know, the faction that, you know, that are obsessed, fixated on violence and whatever, NWA, and doing it just to meet bottom lines, but you had this range, right? So if I'm into, you know, even let's say, you know, feminism, I'm into just sort of supporting women and just strong raps about, you know, women, black women, women of color in general. It's like I could point to, you know, Queen Latifah, like I could point to a bunch of, so now it just feels like there's a disproportionate amount of commercial rap, you know, that tends to be focused and you know, fixated on some of these core negative elements, you know, violence, sexism. That's what it feels like now. You know?
Yeah, I think
so.
That's what it feels like.
So, do you feel with that? I'm glad you brought that up because I know offline I've been talking about Ange about this. Do you feel like it's been engineered that way? Because I remember referring back to Lecrae's TED Talk. He said, you know, during the 80s, a lot of hip hop was very empowering, right? Now, he said when the switch happened, when hip hop started to cross over to, you know, white suburbia and got more commercial, then that's when you start to see more and more hip hop get more and more violent. So my question really is, and I'm throwing it out to all of us, really is, do you feel like, you know, it's engineered to be that way, where that's just the only way it could be successful, or do you feel like it just kind of, it is what it is?
It's interesting that you made mention to that, because I was actually going to write on what Dalton was saying about the narrowing of the field, or the perceived narrowing of the field.
Good point.
Because it is about perception. I mean, Jermaine Dupri said the other day, was it Jermaine Dupri? That said the other day, it seems like all the female rappers are strippers and stuff like that. And that really bothered me. Because there are like some really amazingly dope female rappers out there that are getting no mainstream shine, right? So I feel like, as someone that is a record executive, to say that was real lazy. That told me that he doesn't go out and seek this content. It's just what's fed to him.
Right.
So I do think to a certain extent it definitely is engineered that way.
Right.
But there's, because of, again, social media, having all these different platforms to kind of get your message out, you can find it. Like I know that sometimes when I look at, like, whether it be Spotify or Google Music or what have you, and you just click station, like you click similar artists, I'm introduced to a whole new category of or catalog of artists. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So there really is no excuse for you to be like, oh, this is all that's out there. I don't want to listen to this. I think,
in all fairness, in his defense, I think what he was saying, if you were to ask the average hip hop head, give me 2 top female MCs right now, rappers right now, what's one person you're gonna say off the top?
But I don't feel like you should be able to call yourself a hip hop head if you're just going.
But I think my point is, the point I'm trying to make is, I think he was saying, if you think of I think what he was trying to say is, it looks like in order for you to be a top female rapper in the game right now, you need to have that background.
For sure, or just
if you think
or look like it.
Yeah. So
and we talked about it already. Sex sells, right? But then that goes to misogyny in the entertainment industry, not just in hip hop, but across the board, right? The obsession. If we're gonna, I'm not gonna change subjects, but just to pivot a little bit, the obsession with Adele's weight loss, right? This woman is remarkably talented. Right? Like, she could look like a frog for all I care, and I'd still listen to her music. She is incredibly talented. But everybody's talking about, like, ooh, revenge body, snap back, she left her husband, and, you know? And it's just, so this is just kind of speaks to, again, the misogyny within the industry on a whole. Like, would anybody, who was it? I think it was Cardi that might have responded, or someone responded. It was either Cardi B or Nicki Minaj. I can't remember who responded to it, but was saying, like, if I didn't know, it was Doja Cat?
Yeah.
Right? And she's like, well, if I didn't look like this, you know, would people pay attention to me? And it's chicken or egg kind of situation.
Yeah, totally.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we can place the blame across the board, but just further to your earlier point or question, this idea around it being engineered to be this way, I would say partly yes. But our community is complicit, you know, in its execution now. What I mean is, when you look at, you know, in the West, you know, North America, when you look at the way major labels and record labels, you know, in general are constructed, and you kind of look at, you know, the hierarchy, like who's there, who's really there? Like, I don't know if any of you all have ever been, like, you know, take a stroll through a major label, you know, major recording label, you know, and without naming names. I don't want to get into that because, you know, but it's just, I find it curious that there are so few black men, definitely. There are like none. I mean, that's hyperbole. There are some, but it's few and far between as far as like execs, black men and women. It's minuscule, it's tiny. It's next to near non-existent. Despite the fact that our musics, you know, historically black musics, hip-hop, R&B, soul, continue to outpace and outsell every other music genre. And that's fact, by the way. That's not like conjecture or speculation. It's just like, but, you know, rap and R&B outsell everything now. Just in, you know, you do another show about why that is, but those are the facts. As far as, you know, streaming, you know, Spotify, Apple Music, it's our music that is making the most money by a considerable amount. You know what I mean? So as far as engineering, this, you know, conspiracy theories, conspiracy theorists, I don't blame, you know, like, because there are a lot of people coming out saying like, this is, how is it that the only musicians, whether they be rappers, R&B vocalists doing the trap, the mumble, you're just peddling, you know, you're just shilling all of this sexist, gun-obsessed stuff. Like, that's the stuff that gets signed, right? If we were to do a unofficial like poll, you know, or you know, collect data around what types of acts are getting major recording contracts, and I think you'd be shocked. No, you wouldn't be shocked actually, because you two very progressive, I mean, forward-thinking people. But it's like, again, if I come in and I, you know, look like Cardi B, was a stripper, talk about AK-47s or Dracos now, that's the big one. You know, Draco's the big gun that they talk about. The likelihood of me getting a recording contract and getting, you know, $500,000, couple mil, it's far greater than if I were to come in and rap about veganism and climate change. I'm not getting a record recording contract, is what I'm saying, right? So there is some engineering, 100%. Now, where we're complicit is nobody putting a gun to your head to continue to peddle.
Absolutely. To buy it, you don't have to buy it.
No, you don't have to. But then again, you know, there's a lot of gray, right? When if you're coming from, you know, low income environment and you're somehow feeling that, I have to be on the street corner. You know what I'm saying? Parkdale, do it. You know what I'm saying? Crack. I need money. You know, this is capitalism. I need money. I'm gonna, you know what I'm saying? Like, run guns, do that, then perhaps. But there's nobody pressuring you to do that. Per se, I'm not at all. You know, like.
So you mentioned the word complicit a few times here, and so I know in Lecrae's TED Talk, he said something like, "Hip hop is the language of a generation that grew up without fathers." So, with that being said, knowing that obviously you add in the context that, specifically in America, there was mass incarceration, there was the drug trade, there's a lot of things that happened there to put, the Black community in a certain position. But, with that being said, how much responsibility do you believe is on the Black community versus those external factors like systemic racism? So basically, where would you put the blame? Is it 50-50 or how would you distribute that?
I like that question.
That's a great question. So systemic, the dirty R word. So in any analysis of anything, to include music, sports, fashion, to not account for the dirty R word, racism playing a huge role, we would be extremely naive, delusional, lying to ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Because race does not exist. Just in the same way that race impacts one's employment prospects, educational opportunities, employment. It's not on a separate island from hip hop. You know what I mean, right? It's all being impacted by racism. So let me put that out there. Let me just put that out there. That being said, I would like to think that in 2019, 2020 and onwards, that we know a bit better. We know better. I'm a bit of a student of human history, but that's just me. When I went to school called Oakwood Collegiate in Toronto. It's in the city, and somebody handed me a copy of Malcolm X, autobiography of Malcolm X. Okay, but again, these are
book list for next year, actually.
Yeah, but again, these are tales of yesteryear. If you say this to kids now, like I have 2 kids, like teenagers, they think you're whatever, completely detached from it. They're like, why am I gonna read this? Like I have to go on the gram right now and post some, content, IGTV. Like I don't care about this. Yeah. But but if you hand over, an autobiography, Angela Davis, like some civil rights activist that did a lot to, push forward a positive, forward-thinking Black agenda, it's gonna change a child's life. You know what I mean? That's my view. That's what changed my life. It's autobiography of Malcolm X, because this guy is like saying, I'm a hustler. Kids now, I'm a hustler, I'm toting guns, and I'm a shata, all this stuff. You know what I mean? That's what Malcolm X was, though. Yeah. Malcolm X was on the streets, like pimping. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. And he was just like, yo, there's no future in this. You know what I mean? And he started thinking about, what the hell am I doing this? I'm a Black person, and we've been oppressed, the transatlantic slave trade, the Middle Passage. You start reading a little bit about your histories and her stories, and he just did the switch. So so when you hear from hustlers saying, yo, I was out there banging, you know what I mean? Just a shata, dealing crack on, you know what I'm saying, in Roncesvalles, and then it's like, nah, I can't do this, man. My homies died, I gotta change my life around, right? So the personal responsibility and accountability, that is huge, I would say now, because we know better. If you know better, you gotta do better. You know what I mean? So even in our community, I gotta say this too, right? You talked about fatherhood, this idea around absence of a father or father figure. Does that play a role when we talk about the disproportionate amount of homicide victims, perpetrators and victims happen to be Black and male, right? And no male figure around to help direct and guide, and it's tough. I think that does play a role, 100%. And mothers they're going to do what they do, and they have been doing what they do, and doing a fabulous job at that. But I just think, they just are, though. No, but they just are. I mean, some of the strongest, some of those profound thinkers, cultural workers I know were raised by single mothers, right? That are killing it, that are making a ton of money, you know what I mean? And doing extremely well for themselves, right? They didn't sort of use that, I don't have a father figure around. They're just like, my mother's killing it. She provided for me to be able to do this and go to school and help me every step of the way, and I'm doing great. And I own 5 houses, or if they own no house, that's besides the point, right? But that piece there is huge. I'm actually attached to this fatherhood program, as I have 2 kids, and it's called the Barbershop Project. So we go into barbershops, once a month, and we've been low key doing it for 12 years. And we just convene, a bunch of men. It's in barbershops, right? Because if you wanna find men, I can say, hey, I'm gonna do this gathering at a community center, and nobody shows up because they're busy, working 2 jobs or playing basketball like Corey, tearing their Achilles tendon, or things of that nature. But if you go, if I say, yo, I want to do a community meeting, I want to find Black men, you know what I mean, racialized men, we do it in barbershop, right? It's no different than women. If I want to get a conversation started, with women, it's I'm going to the hair salon. Because they're there. They're going to be there. I don't need to call them out to some third party, Yeah, so we talk about this a lot, the personal responsibility, accountability in our own household. So in Toronto, where I'm based and live, I'm a bit disappointed in so a lot of like our children, right? Because at some point, like if my son goes out and is has a Draco, like it's like this miniature AK-47, he's doing that. That's partly my responsibility. I'm sorry. That's not the responsibility of his educator at school, of his, if it's a pastor at church or whatever, I'm not religious, but that's not their responsibility. That's my responsibility. Right. You understand? So that's just me personally. Yeah. So a lot of people somehow thinking I'm going to send my kid to school and they're going to, no, I don't agree in that. I don't agree with that. Yeah. We have to look and it starts in our households. You think what I'm saying? Whether a father's around or not, but it starts in our households and maybe it ends in our households. Right. But that's my
But I wonder, okay, for your situation, because you are a father and you are present, but for those families that don't have fathers that are present now,
they got mothers. They have mothers,
but I have a niece that I spend quite a bit of time with right now, and I say to my mom, like, I feel like she's mine, right? Like she's my responsibility, her well-being. I didn't birth her. She has a mother. She has a father, but I feel responsible. I feel like children are the community's responsibility. Big time. Right? So even if we're not looking at what's happening in the household, because circumstances.
Yes. Sure.
Financial, mental health. Sure.
Working 2-3 jobs. Working 2-3 jobs to afford to be able to live in Toronto.
There's a lot of that there. So I think, to kind of your point, it is the responsibility of the community at large. And until we kind of can look at that little black boy or little black girl and say that one's mine. That one's mine as much as the one that I gave birth to. I care for that child as much. I'm going to dedicate time and energy and resources to those children. I think it's kind of like, what are we really talking about?
We're not doing that here, but and here's the thing, Corey, Angelina, we're not doing that here. So when it takes a village to raise a child, essentially, 100%. Right? It's like the African proverb. Yeah. And that village has been destroyed. Like when we use that African proverb, we're talking about Africa, the continent, or we're talking about the Caribbean, where a lot of from Toronto, from the Caribbean, right? Whether it be Trinidad, St. Kitts, Jamaica, it doesn't even matter. Yeah. So back home now, quote unquote, when you ask your parents or you go visit and stuff, those villages are still functioning. Yeah. So you can't just go buck wild in the streets and doing all that. No, your aunts, your grandparents, somebody's gonna whoop you upside your head or something. Yeah. Corporal punishment or something's happening. Right? Is it like that here in cold chill in Toronto, where as far as the communities, like are there functioning, like you say, like black communities where it's just like I'm your neighbor Angelina, I know your daughter, you know what I mean? Like if I see her out there, who's that strange guy? I give you a call. Are those communities and villages happening here? I don't see them happening. What I do see is this sort of individualistic, capitalistic, 100%. Like I'm gonna go, let me go buy a house and live out with whatever, and that's it. I'm doing well for myself, okay, and stuff. Right? I work on Bay Street, I'm doing well, but as far as how the community is faring, I don't think anybody gives a shit. That's what I see happening here.
It's funny you mention that. So Dr. Claude Anderson, he wrote a book many years ago called Powernomics, and he said, the gift and the curse of desegregation is that. Obviously the gift is now you have more mobility as a black person in America. The curse is it kind of ruined black solidarity, right? And he also said in that book, he's like, whenever you're a minority within a country, you can't afford to have an individualistic mindset.
Not at all.
Right? And I feel like, I have a lot of friends that, do a lot of entrepreneurial activities. Some of them are in real estate, and then one of my friends said to me recently, they were at a meeting with another real estate developer, and he's like, this other developer was from another community, I think he was maybe Jewish or Italian. He's like, why doesn't your people stick more together? You guys would be able to buy more land and more, like, he was just asking out of curiosity, not because of whatever. He's like, you would be able to do more, you know what I'm saying? So it's interesting. I'm very aware of all the stuff that's happened to us, but then to your point, 2019 going into 2020, we have access to all this information. Like at this point, it's like, yes, we still got some chains, whether it be mental or whatnot, but then it's just like we got info, we can do stuff.
Oh, for sure. We're not circulating the dollar at the same rate as non-black communities. We're just not. Those are the facts, you know. And so that's where the transatlantic slave trade Middle Passage did us dirty. Like we still, I don't think we, you know. No, I'm not blaming our community. You know, I love my community. Also too, I'm also too. For me to say, like, in the mainstream media, and to say, you know, like, I love black people, I love black women, I'm one of those types of people. I love my community, so I say it out of love, you know, just, and we have these, you know, it's internal conversations and critiques to grow our community, right? So, but even saying that in the mainstream, you know, media and the court of public opinion, you know, like, I love black people. People say, like, oh, are you racist? What are you saying? You don't like the Asian community? You don't like but like, in this climate.
Justify our when we say we love ourselves.
No, but you do though.
Absolutely. And I'm one. So again, I typically throw out these Jamaican phrases, but don't be no who for frightened, because there is no way anyone would ever dare come to me and be like, well, why did you say these types of things? So I feel like it's so asinine for us to have to explain. The love for ourselves and our community as if we're not supposed to.
Yeah, but we do though. Like, I mean, you know, the Afrocentric education. You know that. You know, we're saying, hey, the Toronto District School Board (TDSB) is failing our children. 40% dropout rates, like something that is just not even remotely acceptable. 40%, almost one half of black students in Toronto, where I live, TSB are not getting past grade 11, right? Wow. So some scholars and also community activists, community workers, and educators said, hey, okay, maybe we need to, you know, as far as schools that, you know, where the teachers are black, or the administrators are black, and you know, there might be something like, you know, the kids see teachers that are like, hey, if I see a black teacher, I might. It's aspirational, you know. If you see it, you can be it, kind of thing. Yeah. And look at the pushback there. You know what I mean? Like something just to have a school where it's just like it's diverse. Yeah. The curriculum is centered around diversity.
There's Jewish schools. There's Chinese schools. Like every other community.
In my community, like are you kidding me?
But the moment that we're saying, okay, well, let's create infrastructure that supports the growth of our children, the progression of our community, it's a problem. Oh, it's huge pushback. But yeah, I definitely to kind of go back to what you're saying in terms of the fatherlessness. It is something to acknowledge and be aware of, but I do believe that the conviction to change things has to be on a personal level, right? Like we in our community do a fantastic job of identifying the problem and rarely do put things in action to bring about solutions.
Make some great t-shirts.
Break the cycle. 3 words: break the cycle. You know better, Corey, Angelina. I know better. We know better. That's not to say that we're going to have complete mastery or I'm going to be the perfect parent. You know, like in this one of the chapters, I said, like, no, like a lot of our pop culture heroes and sheroes, some of them were terrible parents. Like, I'm not sitting here saying I'm the perfect dad or whatever at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, or as we say in the Jamaican parlance, the patois, I say, man, try that thing. Right? You understand? That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that I make mistakes every day as a parent. But I'm saying I'm doing...
subtitles there.
Exactly. That's right.
That's right.
Exactly. Patois, Jamaican patois. I mean, in Jamaica, they're trying to have it become an official language. So at the University of West Indies Mona campus, because it has a lot of the tenets, of a language unto itself, right?
Absolutely.
So that's you're just doing the best you can do. I don't have any mastery of the profession of fatherhood. Hell no. Hells no. You know what I mean? But we know a bit better. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, so, Ange, take us home.
And again, you talked about going to Oakwood, growing up in Toronto. You've been on the ground since day one.
Since Jesus,
Since Moses was a boy. You've been here, right? You've been a pillar in our community for a really long time. And before I kind of go into the next bit, I just want to thank you for the work that you've done in our community. I thank you for being visible, going on very public platforms and saying, I love Black people, I love Black women. These are very important. These individuals are very important to me and are worthy. So I want to thank you for that.
No, I want to thank you. For, I'm going to tell a 30-second story. How I met Angelina. I had an act, Don Letts. So Don Letts is this legendary British Jamaican filmmaker, video director, and musician. Okay, so he's worked with like the punk, it's not the Sex Pistols, the Clash. Okay, like legendary and Big Audio Dynamite. He was in that band. So these are big, UK punk, like the inventors of punk music. And there was this Rastafarian guy, Jamaican guy, that was always with them, documenting stuff. His name is Don Letts, Letts. I had him in town to do a gig, right? Because this guy's worshipped by white folk, like everybody. Never mind our community. He just happens to be Jamaican, and he's a Rastafarian, you know. Yeah. And I had to put him up, like a hotel. You know what I mean? In downtown Toronto, I needed a nice boutique hotel because this guy's like a celebrity. You know what I mean? But he's also, he's Rastafarian. He's counterculture. Punk music. Rastafarian politics, and Angelina she was like, on some boss stuff at a hotel downtown, like maybe in another life, you know what I mean? And I was like, yo, I don't know if I told you the story, but I said, oh, really? Like the sister that's like running things at the hotel, like the city, at a boutique hotel.
Stop, don't stop.
You dig what I'm saying? So that's I never told you that, but I said, for me, I was like, yo, let's do some business, and then she was able to accommodate my thing. I was like, yo, we just kept in touch, just whatever.
I didn't remember that's how we met.
That's how we met, because I'd grown so accustomed in Toronto to dealing with a non-black business interests when it comes to, it could be hotels, fine wines, whatever the case, right? Yes. And then Angelina pops. I said, oh, really? You're, there's a sister like me? I was like, this is so cool. And that was it for me. I was just like very impressed that there was like a boss black woman holding stuff down in downtown Toronto, where a lot of the resources and money and stuff like that, and hotel, fine wines, whatever. Because she's a woman of many interests, right? So that's cool. So I was very impressed by that.
Oh, thank you. Again, I was like,
that's what it was.
I don't know. I've known him forever.
Yeah. Don Let's in that boutique, that great hotel.
Right. Yeah.
That she helped put together.
No, I appreciate that, but no, it's so having you come on the show, and again, like I said at the top of the show, I really want to make sure you come back again and again, and because this has been great, and we barely scratched the surface on some things. Like when we're talking about, like you said, hip hop is a culture, so it's beyond the music. It's the fashion, it's the art, it's the dance, it's the there's a lot to it, a lot of history. If we talk about like the origins of hip hop coming from ska, reggae music, and Jamaica. And these immigrants coming through and trying to find their place in New York, and speaking with a strong accent, and just all of the history of it. Yes. So that we could definitely talk about hip hop on a whole. This could be a series.
This could be a series. Hip hop. Hip hop has grown up and left the hood. And that's what we're struggling with. Like if you're like older than 22 or whatever, 25 and over, you're just like, what happened to the hip hop culture that I grew up in and loved and revered? Like what happened to it? But it has grown up and left it. It's gone. The suburbs, Corey, so you talked about the largest consumers. There were those numbers that came out that it was like white suburban youth, right? Like it's white kids that are the largest consumers of the culture now. Of this very black African art form. But it's white kids that are, you know what I mean? So with that comes all of this other stuff that we talked about.
Right. I actually want to, because you mentioned that, and I know we're supposed to be wrapping up soon, but I want to touch on something in terms of like gatekeepers, right? And people that have the authority to talk about the culture, and whether or not we're doing a good enough job of maintaining the culture, keeping it, making sure it stays on hallowed grounds.
I don't think you can, because this is how I feel. Because this also ties into the whole, like, this is somewhat related to appropriation, and I feel like with music specifically, once you put it out there into the universe, it's for everybody. You're inviting everybody into your space, man. And because music is such a collaboration of people, if you look at one of the best hip hop or one of the most popular hip hop producers right now, it's a white kid from Niagara Falls named Murder Beats, right? If you listen to a lot of Drake's hits in the last album, his footprint is all over that album. Yeah. So this is why, like, you could say gatekeeper, I can hold on to it, but if you approach it that way, it's also another way of protectionism. That means hip hop doesn't become global. It means it doesn't become universal. So that's why I personally feel like you can't be like this and it becomes this. But I do get what you want out of that, though.
Yeah. What do I want out of that?
This is a great by the way, is a great conversation. This idea of because I'm split on this, right? Because I do on the one hand, like Angelina, to police the culture, where it's just like if you have just mass appropriation, mass co-optation, disrespecting the culture, you're taking it. If this is something that comes out of, we say, African griot to Jamaican toasting, because these are the real histories of it. Jamaican toasting, U-Roy and all that, and then to Kool Herc, who's the godfather, and he's Jamaican, and South Bronx, and so now you're perpetrating this culture and you've stripped away all of what makes the culture,
Yeah.
that shit needs to be policed. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
On the other hand, nothing stays stagnant. Everything evolves. Evolution. Right? You can't, it's not going to stay stuck in 1982.
And it's a free market.
And it's a free marketplace. 100%.
So,
yeah.
Anyways,
yes.
I mean, we could go on and on and on.
We actually could go on forever. But I want to talk about like the work that you've done with specifically Toronto hip hop. Who was it that was just inducted in the Songwriters Hall of Fame? Maestro. Yeah. Which was really epic, right? I remember it was on the 6 p.m. news, and my dad was sitting at the table, and we were watching it together. And I was like, "Jeez, we've come a really long way, you know." And just how do you what's the difference you see happening in Toronto on Toronto streets in terms of hip hop, and what's happening across the border, or arguably around the world? I can't just say across the border anymore, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's go provincial, around to talk about like rap music, hip hop culture. So even the Maestro thing, again, I have mixed feelings about that. And that on the one hand, I'm like, okay, it's great that he's being acknowledged by Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame. But then on the other hand, I'm on some like Tyler Perry type shit, where it's just like I'm not going to sit around and wait to get a stamp of approval or acknowledgements or for the outside culture to pay homage to what we've been doing for like 40 years.
Right.
We're no longer doing that. So if the Juno Awards, if you get it, like let's say you put out this great piece of art, high artistic integrity, like it's crazy, like great music, great subject matter, the beats are phenomenal, the lyrics are spectacular, and it gets no kudos or acknowledgement or recognition from the Juno Awards.
Yeah.
Am I going to sit here being worried about that or get down on myself? Hell no.
Right.
Because the art is great, So mixed feelings there. Because the change in progress in Canada when it comes to the acknowledgement of black music, it's slow. It's like it's turtle, it's glacial.
Yeah.
It's so slow that so this generation, I work with a lot of young rappers who are like half my age, like 21, like they're young, 25, they're kids, and they're not sitting around waiting for the Canadian music establishment to acknowledge their efforts. And they don't give a shit. They don't give a flying shit about what happens here. They're just like, okay, if Canada doesn't mess with me, I'm in Florida, Atlanta, LA. You know what I mean? Like they don't care. They're not gonna wait around for the Juno Awards to acknowledge their art when they know it's like world class art.
My opinion is Junos is irrelevant.
There you go. That's what most of them mean to me.
To be honest with you, what impact does that have on your career? As I get it,
if
but
you
it's
do hip hop, maybe none. I'm saying.
I'm just saying. Yeah,
if you're hip hop and
if you do hip hop, like Junos, do you even care? Like, do they even give out awards for hip hop people at the Junos?
They do, but large aspects of the community are checked out. Again, a lot of the kids I work with as clients, one client of mine, Jazz Cartier, he won the Juno, 2 years ago, and he's an interesting kid. He's just he'd gone to boarding school in the U.S. and is of Jamaican descent, and his stepdad is traveling the world, which is the U.S. government, and so he'd grown up throughout the U.S. He lives in Idaho and New Jersey and Connecticut and everywhere, Dubai, like he's just been everywhere, like a military, those military brats. And his take, so he won the Juno Award, right? And his speech pretty much summed up how a lot of rappers, hip hop culture pushers in Toronto feel, in Canada feel, where he's just like, he goes, I'm here, but the televised part of the show, there's no rap performance. So despite the fact that rap music is outselling everything, rap and R&B outsells every other music form. Country, blues, jazz, pop, whatever you're into, it doesn't even matter, electronic music. And then you're telling me that when I watch a televised broadcast of the Juno Awards, there's not even one rap performance? So he was just like, this is crazy. And then he said he goes at the Juno Awards after party, you guys are going to be playing pure hip hop.
Right.
You know what I mean? But we're not performing on the show. Like nobody. So that's what he said. He goes like, okay, I won the award, but this is ridiculous. Yeah. This has got to change. And he's like, what is he now? 25, 24? He's a kid. You know what I mean? Yeah. This is how he was feeling.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, because I know we could go on for the next 2 hours if we can. Let's say this. The title of the show is Hip Hop is a Murderer. Your answer would be?
Hip hop is a murderer.
Yes or no?
I would say hip hop is pulling the trigger. But as far as when you get the first degree murder charge, they say it's the motive. I say the motive is coming from elsewhere. But hip hop is pulling the trigger, right? But there are other things complicit. There are other things in the shadows that are creating the motive for hip hop to pull the trigger. That's what I would say.